Welcome to Big Blend Radio, where we celebrate variety and how it adds spice to quality of life. Welcome, everybody. You know we love our second Wednesday Books and Authors show with Books Forward. I encourage you to go to their website, booksforward.com, especially if you're publishing a book. But today we are going to be chatting with Melissa Connelly. She is a writer and an author. Her first novel is out now. It actually came out yesterday, October 8th, 2024. It is called What Was Lost. And you know, it's out also, I believe, as an audiobook. I'm going to have to find out about that. Is it coming out,
Yes,
Melissa?
it is. It is.
Okay, well, welcome. That's a way to introduce you. Or do you have an audiobook or not? But audiobook is exciting. Did you get to read it or get a narrator?
I had a narrator, which was really interesting to hear another voice reading my work.
Yeah.
Because actually my process in writing is always to read it out loud. I must have read the draft of this out loud hundreds of times. I'm not exaggerating. So it was very exciting to hear a different voice read it.
Well, I want everyone to know the book is called What Was Lost. And this could have almost been like written as a memoir in a way, right? When you think about the story and that really covers so much sexual abuse, which is really hard, especially when you deal with something like childhood sexual abuse, because, you know, the person who's gone through that, it doesn't kind of shake off of them for a very long time. And I know that you have, you know, a background of education too. And for kids to go through it, it goes into their adult life, and your book covers that. And what a novel. I mean, what spurred you to write about this as part of the theme of the book?
Some of it was my experience working as a child therapist with children who'd been abused and teenagers who'd been abused. But the bulk of it was memories from friends of mine who'd been through this in their teenage years or their even youth. And the idea kind of came to me because I was thinking about someone I had lost touch with who I knew had a very similar experience to this one. And I was like, I wonder how she's carried that through her life. I wonder what she makes of that now and how it's impacted her. And that's how it kind of came to me to do this.
Wow. And so this, we're going to talk about Marty, right? That's your main character. And then she's got a daughter, and that's a whole other story.
Yes.
Ooh, mother-daughter relationships. That's what, you know, Nancy and I have our mother-daughter relationship, and everyone's like, it's so amazing that you're doing all this as a mother-daughter. We're like, it is, absolutely. But don't think it's all hunky-dory. It's never 100%, you know, what people will think. It's, you know, they're complex. The relationships are intensely complex and, beautiful at the same time. Like really, they're amazing. You can't beat it, you know? But wow, you know, there's always going to be some kind of guilt with that too, I think.
Yes. I think in general, parents and children always carry guilt concerning the other. It's just inherent within the relationship. And
because we aren't perfect. You know, there's a life coach, Shelley was in on our shows every month, and she's always like, remember, we are human.
Right.
We are not perfect individuals. We can strive for that, but don't let that get out of control either. But the guilt part is real because we're never perfect about how to handle situations.
Right.
You know, and things in life, trauma, you know, I wonder how many young girls and boys go through this. And it really it will catch up with you later in life if you don't have that help of a therapist, like with what you did with children, being a therapist and in education. I think so many kids sit with this and don't know how to channel it. And then in life, one day it'll come out in the most odd way, you know?
Yeah.
Really weird way.
And often I think it hits you when you become a parent, especially because the way you're reliving your own childhood. And there's that way that all of us are sort of fighting the last battle. And I think for mothers and daughters, there's that symbiotic thing where you're sort of thinking your daughter is you and that the challenges they face are yours. And of course they're not. So the conflict comes from that.
Well, also, Marty, we're going back in her story. You would tell us a little bit about her being so young and how she got her. I hate this term, how she got herself in trouble. See, I almost said it, and now I said it, but I didn't mean it in that context. But isn't that always used? And it's not her fault, but
Right.
it is always.
Right.
That is such a common term. My gosh, wow, we gotta eliminate that one.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah. Tell us her backstory.
Well, it is characters like Marty who are groomed for something like this. She was a lonely child. She had had an accidental burning as a child, totally accidental, but it had somewhat scarred her face. So she was teased as a child. And also her father had died when she was very young. So there was that searching for a father figure. So she was kind of easy to groom. She was very invested in her artwork. And it was her art teacher when she was 14 who abused her. And, you can kind of see how she naively fell into it pretty quickly.
There is a true story of that, of a famous woman artist, and that's what happened to her back in like the 1400s, I think, or
Oh, wow.
1500s. Yeah, and it was a friend of
Huh.
her dad's. Her dad was an art teacher, and he said, "Okay, well, an artist, very prolific artist," and I don't want to get it all wrong, but yeah, and what was sad is this woman's art is incredible, right? And yet everybody kind of looked at her because of that,
Huh.
and
What was
that kind of
the name? I don't know this story.
yeah, I'm going to dig it up. I'm going to dig it up. But, you
Okay.
know, these things do happen. And like you're saying, groomed for it, right? And here it is. It happens. And then she ended up pregnant, right? So
Yes.
that part, then here it is. And this is before Roe versus Wade. And look at where we are now.
Yeah, when I started writing this, I had no idea how relevant it would be now, because it's before Roe, and she lives in a state where abortion is illegal, and she attempts to travel out of state to get one, and disastrous complications ensue.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's really, that's a rough one because also, I mean, abortions, I mean, when I grew up in South Africa as a kid, it was illegal in the country for
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
But there were clinics for women, and they did have the overnight pill thing, but abortions were illegal, unless you were raped or, you were dying or it could kill you. You know what I mean? You could have a chance of dying. So I think they had those open rules, but our country is kind of like, that's it. I think we've gone really far. Like it's kind of crazy what's happening now. So with this book, because weren't you writing this before Roe versus Wade was getting overturned
Oh,
here?
yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It was completed before then. Yeah.
Wow. That's wild. And then here it is, right? So,
Yeah, I thought I was illuminating an earlier time for people. I didn't realize I was illuminating our time.
wow, wow, wow. So, so she goes off, has this, and then this abortion, right? And then from there, that's her story. And then her daughter and her, tell us a little bit about that, her background. Now this is happening and she has to kind of move on with life from there, right? And kind of ignore what's happened in the past, or does she ignore
Right.
that?
Well, that's pretty much what she attempted to do most of her adult life, was ignore it, was stuff it under the rug. But it, of course, was still impacting her. Her marriage was unsuccessful. She's divorced when the book begins. And her daughter is 14, the exact age that this happened to her. And that's kind of the trigger for her that opens up the well of all these memories. And she decides to go back to her hometown to finally confront all this for
Wow.
herself.
That's hard. It's
Yeah,
hard.
yeah,
But it gives you closure in a way, right? So it's just like, why people go to funerals is like, then you realize, yes, the person is actually deceased.
right,
If
right.
you don't go, you kind of have that, we'll start thinking Elvis is going to come out of the building again. If you didn't go to his funeral, you think they're coming back, or there's just a it's just weird,
Yeah.
it just doesn't feel final or real. So that's an interesting thing about facing this. So with your book out now, I mean, do you feel that your book will maybe shed some light of what's happening in today's terms? Because this all started, before Roe versus Wade, and now we hear, it takes you through different eras of time. But here we are now. Do you think maybe this will shed light and give some comfort to those maybe going through this right now?
Yes, I certainly hope so. And my character, Marty, is pretty lucky in the sense that when her mother finally learns of her pregnancy, her mother is supportive of her getting an abortion. Her mother has the financial means to leave the state, to know how to do it. And a difference between the time this was set, which is 1972, to now is I could be wrong about this, but my memory, having lived then, is that there wasn't this kind of retribution that there is now. I don't think people were looking to see if parents were taking their children out of state for an abortion, to arrest them, and all of that. I think it's more fraught now than it was then.
Wow. Yeah, I think it's crazy now. And
Yeah,
and it's gone so political, and so it's scary because once women's rights start getting taken away, other rights start getting taken away
yeah,
as well. You
yeah,
know, I don't know where South Africa is now on those changes, but I think there's definitely a movement to overturn and all of that again. But in the meantime, women are in trouble
yeah,
and going through this. And that's why I think it's so important. Sometimes fiction really helps, even for the people on the other side who think, it's a good idea to ban abortions. Maybe they'll get some understanding. Do you hope for that too?
sure, definitely. Yeah. And I
I,
think the case that really shocked me in the last year was the woman who was arrested for having flushed her miscarriage down the toilet,
oh my gosh.
which is, to mine, I've never had a
No.
miscarriage, but every woman I knew, basically, that's what they did, unless they happened to have gone to a hospital. But now, if you are having a miscarriage and you go to a hospital, you're turned away because the hospital doesn't want to be seen as perhaps helping an abortion. So, what else can you do but flush it down the toilet? That one really shocked me. The charges against her were later dropped, but nonetheless, they were filed. And of course,
And what do you think she's already feeling like, A
right,
miscarriage is
right.
traumatic.
She wanted the child. Yeah.
It's
So she
all
was already
traumatic.
grieving that.
Well, and
And
also
salt in the wound was she was an African American woman.
oh,
Of
come
course,
on.
that's who gets arrested for that.
Yeah. And I wonder, when you think it wasn't that long ago, and I know it's still happening in the backwoods of places, eugenics existed. It's so weird. It's
Yeah,
like, hey, you must have this child, but over here, we're going to just, we're going to give you a hysterectomy, whether you like it or not. We're going to sterilize you over here because, you're not the perfect race or,
right, right.
I mean, so, and I wonder how many are the same people voting on the same thing, going, we want eugenics, but we want these people to never have an abortion or a miscarriage. And I think they're the same people sometimes.
Oh,
I'm going to
yeah,
get in trouble
definitely.
now, aren't I?
Right. And it's the same people who don't want to help the child when they're born. I mean, I had a career for many years working with abused children and impoverished children, and wow, the lack of support they get. I think teenage mothers are some of the most heroic people I've ever known, that,
Mm,
that they were able to love their child and care for them however imperfectly they could do it. They still tried. And I think
mm,
my experiences being in my mid 30s, married, economically stable when I had my children, and it was still the hardest thing I ever did. And I had all the education, how to raise a child, all that knowledge, but it was still incredibly hard.
it is. And it doesn't, you say, oh, by 18, it's over. It's not. It's not, you know, and I think parents are often, growing up with their kids in a way. It's a whole new learning field, right?
Oh, yeah.
So they're
Oh, yeah.
learning at the same time as your kids are learning. You're learning too, and it's just different levels, you
Yeah.
know?
I actually first became a parent at age 26 when I was single. I adopted a 12-year-old
Oh,
girl.
wow.
And what a learning curve that was, because
Yeah.
I was so naive to think, oh, I'm ready for this. I've worked with abused children. I know how to take care of this 12-year-old child who grew up in foster care. And
Oh,
wow,
hard. That's
no,
hard.
I didn't know how. Yeah.
Yeah. But the abuse side, I'm hoping more and more we have more awareness. I don't know why it happens. I think people who abuse, there's a control issue. Just that's my own personal thing on that. Um, and I don't know why that is, why there's that necessity of power, and then rapists, I mean, from what I've learned is that they actually can't be rehabilitated that much. I mean, rapists are rapists, and I don't know if that's true. Have you come across any statistics in your work in the past about that, about rapists? To me,
Um,
a child molester is a rapist. I don't care.
yeah.
It is, period.
Yeah.
Rape is when someone says no to anything and you force them. I don't care what it is. You shouldn't force people to do anything, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I think it's a mixed bag. I think some rapists are just people whose brains are wired wrong from
Hmm.
the get-go, like serial killers and things. And in a way, that's not their fault. They've just had the bad luck of having their brain not
Hmm.
wired right. But I also think a huge percentage of them are people who were abused themselves.
Hmm.
And it's that way of diminishing your own abuse by repeating it lessens it. It's the same way often people who were abused become promiscuous themselves. It's like
Hmm.
repeating the experience to nullify it.
Isn't that wild? Yeah, because you're
Yeah.
controlling it if you're the promiscuous one.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And there's an episode in my book where Marty kind of does that when she's hitchhiking. She makes a choice to repeat what's happened to her.
Isn't
Um,
that wild?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, it's hard, especially when you're young, you don't know quite how to sort it out. And there's blame on that. You feel guilty and shamed when something like that happens to you. There's a
yeah,
shame that carries. And I think that's also part of that promiscuity. That's a promiscuousity.
yeah,
That's a good word. I'm full of good
yeah,
words today. But that's part of that is that, there's a shame with it. And then you're trying to, well, if I control it, it's not as shameful, right? And then for women, you're blamed for all of it. Now, if you get promiscuous as a woman, oh my, you're a
yeah,
whore, you're a slut, you're all of these
right,
things,
right.
and looked down upon. And I think even in religion, it's, women have been looked down upon if that's happened to them, which has been unfortunate in the years.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
So therapists, that's a hard thing. And I think that's again the power of books. A young girl picks up your book and can identify and not feel alone. That's the thing. I think so many women are going to start feeling very alone because you can't even help your best friend without you going to jail too, you
Right.
know? And
Right.
that's going to try a lot of relationships in this country, you know, on that level of, I'm going to help my friend. I would help my friend, you know, and if she goes to jail, I go to jail, you know, that kind of thing. It's,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I think it's going to be a very heavy load for people, you know, and I'm single and don't have kids, so I could get away with something like that, right? But a mom helping another mom may not be able to do that. So
Yeah.
it's very, gosh, we've caused a lot of problems.
Yes.
Can I?
Yeah. The one thing, though, positive I'll say that's different about now to Marty's time is at least there's conversation around it. You know, in the era that
Yes.
Marty grows up, which was the era I grew up, nothing was discussed. You
Yeah.
know, you
Silent.
get a parent who was an alcoholic, you didn't discuss it.
Mm-mm.
Divorced parent,
Oh no.
oh my God. You know, so all of it was kind of swept under the rug. We were perfect nuclear families, you know, and
Yeah.
that wall's been shattered.
Well,
Um,
yeah, you're the generation, the kids of the silent generation, pretty much,
yep,
right?
yep. And I look
Yeah.
at that and I think that a lot of that came from their trauma, you know, the
Mhm.
trauma of World War II that they weren't ready to really discuss and deal with, that they had to live through. So they wanted to create this perfect world after that, this mirage of a perfect world. So they're blameless too.
Wow. So when you think about it all keeps going down and down and down, and then I think even, well, women have been raped for gazillions of years.
Yeah.
And, you know, when they wanted to have an abortion, they would go to extremes, you
Yes.
know, coat hangers, drinking poisons, and
Yep.
I mean, historically, really bad things that, you know, practically killed them in the process and did kill them. There were women who died
Oh
doing
yeah.
that,
Oh yeah.
you know. And when it comes from the rape side, it's so difficult. And, you know, you think about the history of mankind and womankind, by the way. We've got, you know, wars, and then the wars dominate everything. However, everything shifts because of the war, like the World War I, World War II, Vietnam War changed a whole bunch of things, right? And you just got to think about you. Everybody during those phases just had to keep moving for survival purposes. So trauma was not allowed.
Right.
Trauma was a luxury in a way. If
Yeah.
does that make sense? You know what I mean? Where you're not
Yes.
allowed to look at it because you're
Yes.
too busy actually surviving and dealing
Yes.
with
Yes. That's
things.
very true. Yes. Um,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
rape was a tool of warfare, you know, still is, has always been a tool of warfare. So there's also that piece of it.
Yeah, you're right about that, man. So in the first part, obviously I get where you're coming with the story, right? And what inspired you with the story. Is that what led you to actually write a novel, or were you always thinking of writing a novel? Because I see that you've written in other places before, and um, obviously it's been in your blood to do.
Yeah.
So, what was
Yeah.
the catalyst that said, "Hey, you got to do it now"? And you know,
I think it was a couple of things. I've always written. I always intended to be a writer. And when I was young, I didn't really have the luxury of just devoting myself to that. I knew that I needed to choose a career that I could earn a living at because I was going to have a lot of school loans and things to pay back. So I initially became a nurse and I thought, oh, that's a great career for a writer. Life and death. I'll have so many things to write about, not realizing how all encompassing my career would be and how passionate I'd feel about it. Um,
mm,
so writing was kind of always in the background, and I wrote a lot of short stories. And often when I was in workshops, people would say to me, "Oh, I think you're really a novelist." And I'd be like, "Yeah, who has time for that? No, not doing that." And I think a big catalyst for me was when I was in my mid 40s, my husband died very suddenly. And I had two young children to raise. So it was a very traumatic, shocking time for me. But it also made me go, what matters in my life? What is important to me other than my children? I need things for myself that I want to live for. And writing was part of that. And it was like, when are you going to write a novel? If not now, when? Get to work. So that was a huge motivator, I think.
Yeah, if not when, go for it,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know? Well, I'm glad you did. Are you going to do more?
Yeah, I am working on a second novel that I just kind of on my computer, it's saved as fledgling, because it's still in its beginning stages. And it's very different for me than this one because this novel, I had a roadmap. I kind of thought about the book for a year before I started writing it, and I pretty much knew the arc of it. Some things changed as I was writing it. In fact, some of the best sections, I think, were places I didn't know I was going to go to. As I was writing, I was like, whoa, I didn't know this was going to happen. Keep going, keep going. But nonetheless, I did have a blueprint, which really
Hmm.
helped. And my second novel, I don't have that
Hmm.
as much. And I think that's good. I think it's good not to always know where you're going and let yourself just explore. So,
Yeah. I think you have to have that. Like with Marty being such a strong character, does she talk to you when you were writing the book? Like,
yeah, absolutely. Um, and the character, in some ways, that I think spoke to me the most was a friend of hers, her friend Peter, who was very involved in her childhood. And then she reconnects with him as an adult. And exploring his journey really took off for me. It's kind of like I remember a line Grace Paley always said about you have to write the first story to get to the second story. You start with one character and it leads you to another. And that very definitely happened to me. The kind of last third of the book is a lot of his journey, which was really interesting to me.
hmm. Yeah, that's the thing to me is that the whole process is fun, but you're sweating bullets too while you're doing it. The
Oh
whole,
yeah.
you know, did you feel stressed on getting things done on a specific time, or do you just let it be and then deal with it once it's written?
It took me a long time and it took me a whole lot of rewrites, which in a way is my favorite part of writing is rewriting. The empty page I find really terrifying. And then the first draft, I'm always kind of going, oh, don't look at it. It's terrible. It's terrible. Oh, you've got nothing here. And it's only when I go back and I go, oh, there is a little something here I could work with. Maybe this is something. And then you finally get to the place where you're tweaking it and tweaking it. And I can spend weeks on one paragraph, and when you finally feel you're getting it to soar, that's a golden moment, that's kind of the whole point.
I love it. I love it. Well, I think the whole process is cool, and I always just so appreciate authors, and there's so much in putting the book, writing it, getting it together. I mean, there's just so many levels in creating one book, right? And then it's like, then there's the whole marketing part of it and going on podcasts and letting people know, hey, I wrote a book and it's cool. You should read it. And so are you going to be doing events or are you going to do, book clubs, that kind of thing with this?
Yes. I am
Awesome.
available to read anywhere, and I will show up in person or on Zoom to anyone's book group who wants to discuss it. You can find out information via my website, which is melissaconnelly.com.
Mm-hmm. Everyone go there. And then you can get the book everywhere. It's out now today. And happy pub day for yesterday. So we should say that. It is out now. Again, it's called What Was Lost by Melissa Connelly. And if it's not in your local bookstore, ask your local bookstore to get it. You can get it online as an audiobook. You can get it digitally as an ebook, and get it as a hardcover too, right? Or is it paperback hardcover?
It's paperback. It's
That's
distributed by Simon and Schuster, so it's
awesome.
Available anywhere.
She doesn't mess around. Like, if she's going to do a book, she's going to go get them. That's awesome. I love that. And it's also done through She Writes Press, which is awesome. I wanted to tell you that artist real quick. I did look it up, and we've actually done 2 stories on this. Artist Victoria Chick wrote this, and her name is Artemisia Gentileschi, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly whatsoever. Or Gentile She. It's like Gentile and then SCHI. Her father, Orazio, was an accomplished painter who gave her earliest training and strong support. They lived in Florence, Italy, and in the second half of the 16th century, he was influenced by the paintings of Caravaggio. And so he associated himself in the workshop of another painter named Tossi, who ended up being Artemisia's teacher, because she'd kind of gone above her teacher. By 17, she was an accomplished painter. And so her father asked Tossi to take her on as a student. And since he thought he had taught her all he could, so Tossi raped her, which is why we know so much about her today, more than her art. She was rediscovered during the feminist movement of the 1970s and became a symbol of all women whose art had been ignored by institutions. Her genuine ability as a painter made that situation quickly rectified, and she has now given her place in art history textbooks. And then she got married and had 4 kids, and only one actually survived childhood. Wow. So, yeah, there's a whole story about her. She was pretty impressive, and she moved around and had a life, So, yeah. But yeah, isn't that kind of squelched, Oh, you got raped, so you're worthless. Like what,
Right.
So, yeah. So that's a interesting story. So many stories like that of women, right? But in the art world too, women were, like, if you did art or you wrote, that was a hobby, but the men could be published,
right?
Right. So, very interesting on how we've changed things. Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad you wrote your book, and I'm so glad you joined us on the show. Everyone, again, What Was Lost, again, is by Melissa Connelly. Go keep up with her on her website, melissaconnelly.com. I'll have that link in the episode notes. Thanks again to our friends over at Books Forward. Thanks so much, Melissa. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure talking about really hard things. Yeah, really. Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio. Keep up with our shows at bigblendradio.com.